Joining us now, the president of the Conservative Victory Fund, also the former Attorney General of Virginia, on the front lines of fighting Obamacare before it was popular, also candidate for governor in 2013, losing narrowly to Terry McAuliffe, and a potential gubernatorial candidate, we understand, in 2017. Ken Cuccinelli, Mr. Attorney General, great to have you back.
Good to be with you, John. How are you doing?
Doing fantastic. I'm going to get to your endorsement of Senator Cruz on Friday in a minute. I want to start with something that's really gotten under our skin today, which is this Republican Party of Virginia making people sign a pledge or a statement of affiliation in order to vote in the March 1st Republican primary. In other words, you go and you ask for a ballot.
To vote in the primary, you've got to say that it's my present intent to vote for the Republican nominee.
Yeah, isn't that exclusive? I mean, aren't we trying to bring independence and people in?
We have an absolutely open primary system in Virginia, which means anybody, including a Democrat, can walk in and vote. That's the law, but the law also allows the state central committee to do what they did, and that's vote for a loyalty pledge. And now, none of this, I think, would even be necessary in their perspective, or would they even consider it if we had party registration? But we don't have party registration, and so this is a weak substitute. I'm not blaming the Republican Party for it being weak. They don't have party registration, and they have long pushed their own General Assembly members to give them party registration. And if that existed, this would not. I can see how someone would be, somewhat offended by this. Hey, I don't want to have to commit to do A, B, or C. But in most states, I think, you can't even vote, you can't even walk into the primary if you haven't already made that commitment effectively, or picked teams, if you will. So there are downsides to it, there are upsides to it, and of course it's particularly interesting in the context of Donald Trump's discussions. Are you going to run third party, aren't you? And he committed again not to do that. But so I suspect that people have all sorts of opinions on this. I don't think they necessarily define anybody as conservative or not conservative. I mean, this is really kind of a process thing. But either way, as you noted, I endorsed Ted Cruz, and I know the Cruz campaign is more or less ignoring this stuff. They're just pressing ahead with their campaign and really doing a good job of it, and they're not paying attention to this sort of process stuff. They're making their pitch to the American people, and the senator's doing a very good job of that, obviously. He's been performing pretty well around the country, and Virginia's no exception. So I'm looking forward to helping them press that case, and that's what I plan to do. I'm going to I'm starting by talking to you, but I'm also going to be on, of all places, hardball tonight.
That'll be fun.
Well, we'll see about that, but never pleasant for any of us in the center right, as you can imagine. And but I've been on there once before and did just fine, and we'll see how we do tonight.
Oh, you'll have a lot of fun there because you really have no downside. Because
no, not there. Yeah,
really
not there. I mean,
what no
what do you worry about, offending him?
Exactly.
I mean, so we'll see. But it was a great event on Friday. They literally packed the place, 1,000 people in there, and a lot of energy. A very warm reception from me personally. I was very grateful for that. But more importantly, there are people going out of there ready to do the work necessary to win in Virginia on March 1st here. There's a lot of energy associated with Ted's campaign. People are so. And you've talked about this a million different ways on your show at various times. How often have you been talking about some Republican who basically just didn't do what they said they were going to do? And that's, frankly, an awful lot of them are in that category, and Ted Cruz is not. And I think that gives people a lot of enthusiasm to be able to get behind a consistent conservative with a track record that doesn't just go into the Senate. It goes back to his time as Solicitor General of Texas, where he won some incredibly significant cases, 10th Amendment, Ten Commandments cases, a death penalty versus foreign interference case that the Medellin case, and then all the way back to what people know the least about, his time at the FTC, where he was the policy director, where no one knew what he was doing. He was never running for office back then. It was the beginning of the Bush administration, and it was like having Milton Friedman writing policy. That was how it was described at the time. I mean, this is a guy who has been true to these principles even when no one was looking. Mm-hmm. And that's the kind of person I want to get behind. They also happen to be running the very best grassroots campaign on either side of the aisle in the country. And you know what a grassroots guy I am, John. Sure. I have a lot of respect for that.
Well, Mr. Attorney General, let's get to Ted Cruz and get to Iowa, where the new CBS New York Times poll came out the other day. He has a 9-point lead over Trump. He's at 40% in Iowa. Stunning number.
That is right? A stunning number.
I mean, look, there's 13 or 14 candidates. I don't I forget after a while.
Yeah, we've lost count at this point.
Right. There's 13 or 14 candidates, and he's at 40% in the Iowa caucuses. I mean, that is like I said, that's just stunning.
Well, two comments, John. I could first vote just after Ronald Reagan was reelected, so I didn't get to vote for Ronald Reagan. But this field of candidates is so good, going back to the beginning, when you had Walker and Jindal and so forth. If I could take one of them and put them in each presidential election I have voted in, I think I could have someone better to vote for in every presidential election that I voted in. I mean, that's how good this field is. And Cruz is at the top of that heap. But I don't want anybody to think that I don't respect and think very well of a lot of these other candidates. This is a really strong field of candidates. And what 40% in Iowa shows you is consolidation is happening. In a field that big, for anybody to get to 40% in any state is really pretty extraordinary. And we'll see if the polls hold up. We're headed into Christmas here, where the race is essentially going to freeze in place for about 2 weeks until we come back out of New Year's and things pick up again. And then we're going to be within a month of the Iowa caucuses. And the truth of the matter is because Ted is perceived now as a front runner, you're seeing more people taking shots at him, including Trump. And that's the nature of the beast. That's just what goes with the territory. But he's consolidating conservatives who've been taking a look around, who've watched Scott Walker and Bobby Jindal drop out and Rick Perry drop out. I mean, these are powerful names that have dropped out, and then some others haven't really gotten traction that have in the past. And so not only do people want the best candidate, they want the person who will be the best president, they do want someone capable of pulling off the win in the nomination. And the number of candidates that appear capable of doing that is dwindling. And near the top of that list is Senator Cruz. And again, it's because he has challenged the establishment. There are a lot of people in this race who talk about how they're going to take on the establishment. And boy, are they going to be tough with them. Well, Cruz has done it. He's already done it. So if you want someone who doesn't just talk about this stuff during a campaign, but goes in and actually does it and has an impact, and people can go back and look. I mean, he was, with Jeff Sessions, he was in the forefront of stopping that Gang of Eight bill. Right. He has been a true fighter to actually use the power of the purse by Congress to stop the president, as all of these Republicans promised they would do. Well, he's one of the few, I won't say he's the only one, but he's among the few that are actually trying to keep those promises. And it's really amazing to watch somebody like Mitch McConnell, who gets more angry with Ted Cruz and fights harder with Ted Cruz than he does with Democrats. And all that Senator Cruz is trying to do is make Mitch McConnell keep his own campaign promises. During his nomination contest with Matt Bevin, who he beat, Senator McConnell said, we're going to use these riders to make the president do and not do certain things. And here's a quote, John, I guarantee it. Mitch McConnell, I guarantee it. And yet, he fights like the dickens, and he did it again this week, to avoid using those budget riders in must-pass bills to do things like stopping Syrian refugees until we have some sort of vetting process in place, if that's even possible, or defunding Planned Parenthood, or slowing down or stopping Obamacare. I mean, these are the things Mitch McConnell promised to do in his Republican nomination for re-election, and he has utterly failed to do them. He's actually fought Senator Cruz in the other direction. To Senator Cruz's credit, he campaigned on very similar things, and he has been ready to do them. So if you want a president with the backbone to actually shrink the government, to shrink its power, to bring a more rational foreign policy, or frankly, compared to this president, any foreign policy, a consistent foreign policy into place, Ted Cruz is the top of the heap. He's the top of the heap, and he's a great civil libertarian and a hard dollar, meaning, you know, he wants to be a hawk on the Fed, character just like Reagan was, frankly, and I think that's what America needs. And we're at a tipping point. It isn't enough to just have somebody win this election and block Hillary. We got to have somebody who's smart enough and got the spine enough to go in and rip out the cancers that this president has put into the body politic and pull them out, not just manage how bad it feels with all those in there. That's not enough.
Mr. Attorney General, you're absolutely right, because just replacing Clinton with Clinton Light, I don't think is going to do anything when you look at the disastrous trajectory of the United States right now. And as far as the writers are concerned, you know, sanctuary cities got funded, amnesty got funded. Everything that they said.
I mean, John, what are we doing? What are we doing?
I get these congressmen on my show day after day, and they're going to defund amnesty. They're going to defund. They're going to wait for DHS. Then they're going to defund sanctuary cities. Then they're going to defund the Syrian refugees. But then they say we need to get a majority in the Senate, and then we need to get a bigger majority in the House. They got everything. They got everything they asked for, all the phone calls made, all the people knocking on doors, all the checks sent, and we don't have anything to show for it. Mr. Attorney General, you look at this omnibus bill, and it's a disaster.
I
mean, what is the difference if Nancy Pelosi was the speaker and Harry Reid was the majority leader? How would this omnibus been any different?
You know, John, it's interesting you raised that. Let's take a look at the whole year, and let's look at something even worse than this awful omnibus bill, the Iran deal.
Oh, my goodness.
All you need to talk about is the Senate here. If Republicans did not, I repeat, did not control the Senate, if they had less than 50 senators, but more than 40, there would be no Iran deal. We are worse off for a Republican majority because of how the Republican leadership is managing it than if we had a Democrat majority, if for no other reason, the Iran deal, which may prove 15 years from now, we may look back and say this was worse than Neville Chamberlain in 1938. And the reason for that, for your listeners, is if the Republicans were in the minority, their instinct, including Mitch McConnell's, would have simply been to fight it.
Right.
They'd have made a political issue of it. Instead, Mitch McConnell is determined to do what he calls governing, which you and I call surrendering. But he thinks that's governing. And if they were in the minority, they would have filibustered. There would have never been a Corker-Cardin bill. They would have filibustered any bill that would have set the president up on this. They would have filibustered it. Really, they would have just flat out defeated it as a treaty if it ever came before them as a treaty. We wouldn't have an Iran deal. So we're actually, as a matter of the safety of not just America, but the whole world, and especially if you're Israel, I mean, the country they threaten all the time ahead of us, we're worse off.
Right.
And that's a really, to say an embarrassing state of affairs for the Republican Party is really a dramatic understatement. But again, there was a small number of senators who fought this, as you'll recall, in August and September, and Ted Cruz was leading the pack in that regard. And they made it very difficult for them, unfortunately, with the massive support of Democrats, including the ones in our state, that went forward. The president got his policy, at least until the next president comes in. And Ted Cruz is one of a number of Republicans who've said on day one, I'm ripping that deal up. Since it's not a treaty, they can do that. The key is that happen before all the money be transferred to Iran that funds their nuclear program.
I mean, $150 billion, and we didn't even get our 4 prisoners back. The thing is so ridiculous. But I just have to ask this question. Many Republicans, and especially conservatives, Mr. Attorney General, feel betrayed, lied to and betrayed by the leadership of the Republican Party in Washington and many of their leaders and many of their representatives who say one thing and then get up there and do something else. I'm not going to name names, but every time I think it's the final
you really
straw,
have to name exceptions to that, John.
Yes.
You know, I mean, it's more the rule than the exception up there. It's awful.
And I mean, for instance, I'll just give you one thing. There's one congressman, 7th District, Dave Bratt, who basically said what he would do and did exactly what he said he would do. Okay, so again, if you don't like him, you can vote him out. But he said exactly what he would do, and now he's getting a primary challenge, and that doesn't make any sense to me because he said he would do exactly what he said he would do, and then you get other people that do the exact opposite, and they get a check. I don't understand what is going on right now, and how do you fix it?
Yeah, well, I mean, you are absolutely right in that regard, and we could go through after example, but the best way to fix it, at least the quickest way to fix it, is to get a president who's ready to demolish it, who's ready to go to war with the establishment and the so-called leadership, and that's Ted Cruz. He has proven it. Really, he's the only one who both says it and has a track record of doing it. He is the only candidate who fits both of those bills consistently. Are there times various candidates have been opposed to the leadership? Yes. But as a general matter, they tend to not make them upset. They literally try not to make them upset. Ted Cruz has never been concerned about that. He's concerned about serving the American people, and he's been successful doing it. And if you want to cut into that problem, then you need a president who's ready to go to war with his own party to do the right thing. Well, and only Senator Cruz has proven he's willing to do that.
I can certainly appreciate your enthusiasm for Senator Ted Cruz, without a doubt. I want to thank Attorney General Ken Cuccinelli for being with us today.
Good to be with you, John.
Merry Christmas to you and your family. Thank you so much.
You do the same. God bless you.
All right, sir. Ken.